The question, am I master of my acts, appears at first glance to rest on a performative contradiction. If the I is defined by its very nature as the conscious and free instance that stands above the chaos of drives, feelings, and volitions, as the sovereign chief presiding over them, then asking whether this I is master of its acts amounts to inquiring whether the master is in fact master. Such a formulation is tautological or self-undermining. It either presupposes the answer within the definition of the subject or assumes that the master could possibly not be master, thereby contradicting the initial premise. The question thus seems philosophically empty or contradictory from the outset. Yet it is precisely this apparent contradiction that constitutes a genuine philosophical problem. A rigorous problematization must therefore refuse to treat the sovereign I as an unexamined given, and instead expose the historical and conceptual fragility of that presupposition. The task is not merely to denounce the contradiction, but to show how it reveals deeper tensions concerning the nature of subjectivity, freedom, and agency. 1. The presupposed I as master, an illusory evidence. When the I is posited as a unified, conscious, and autonomous-centered decision in the Cartesian tradition of the cogito that wills and commands, the question, am I master of my acts, becomes autophagic. It devours itself. The answer is already contained in the definition. This formulation echoes classical conceptions of the subject as substance or sovereign will, Descartes, certain Stoic or canon readings of practical reason. However, the very act of raising the question in this manner betrays a metaphysical commitment that philosophy has repeatedly contested. The problematization begins by suspending this commitment and asking whether the I is truly, by definition, the master claims to be. 2. Critiques of the sovereign I, the master undermined. Several major philosophical traditions have dismantled the idea of the I as an autonomous ruler standing above chaotic drives. The I as fiction or bundle. David Hume describes the self as nothing more than a bundle of perceptions in perpetual flux, with no permanent core capable of mastery. Friedrich Nietzsche, here in the video. This video shows the only animated images we have from him. At that time, the philosopher was already very ill. Nietzsche radicalizes a critique of Hume. The I is a grammatical fiction, an effective language and a surface phenomenon masking the play of multiple drives and the will to power. To ask, am I master? Is to remain trapped within a metaphysical grammar that Nietzsche seeks to overcome. The unconscious and the decentering of the ego. Sigmund Freud famously asserts that the ego is not master in its own house. The conscious I is merely the tip of an iceberg dominated by unconscious forces. What appears as voluntary action is often the rationalization of drives that precede and exceed conscious control. Determinism and illusion of freedom. Baruch Spinoza argues that humans believe themselves free only because they are conscious of their actions while ignorant of the causes that determine them. The apparent mastery of the I is an illusion born of inadequate knowledge. Everything, including so-called voluntary acts, follows necessarily from the infinite chain of causes. Freedom is anguish or noumenal postulate. Jean-Paul Sartre maintains that the I is condemned to absolute freedom, yet this freedom is experienced as anguish and is frequently evaded through bad faith. Immanuel Kant, for his part, distinguishes between the phenomenal realm, where causal determinism reigns, and the noumenal realm, where transcendental freedom makes moral responsibility possible. In both cases, the mastery of the I is not a simple given but a tense, problematic achievement. These critiques converge on a common insight: the linguistic and conceptual structure of the question itself. I, as subject of the verb to master, already fabricates a very entity whose sovereignty it pretends to interrogate. 3. Possible solutions. Dissolving or redefining the I. Faced with this aporia, several avenues emerge for moving beyond the contradiction. Radical dissolution of the subject. One coherent response consists in abandoning the I altogether, Once the sovereign subject is recognized as a metaphysical illusion, the question am I master of my acts loses its meaning. Acts occur as impersonal becomings or multiplicities. Freedom, if it still makes sense, is no longer property of a master, but the immanent play of forces. The solution lies in thinking without a subject. Modest compatibilist redefinition now. There is a path which redefines the I not as an all-powerful ruler, but as a limited instance of second-order reflection and identification with one's desires. Harry Frankfurt, Christine Korsgaard. Mastery is then understood as a practical, partial capacity rather than an ontological absolute. The question shifts from metaphysical sovereignty to degrees of reflective endorsement and responsibility. Dialectical acceptance of attention. A third approach preserves the contradiction as constitutive of human freedom. The I is simultaneously master in the reflexive act of questioning and slave to forces that precede it. Thinkers such as Sartre and Kant suggest that genuine freedom or moral agency emerges precisely from living this insoluble tension rather than resolving it. This very contradiction discloses the fragility of the modern concept of the sovereign subject. Planification and summary. Part 1 of the thinking. The I as master, an apparently self-evident but deceptive premise, with the help of Cartesian and classical perspectives. Part 2 of the thinking. The deconstruction of the sovereign I, with the help of, among others, Friedrich Nietzsche. Part 3 of the thinking. Beyond the aporia. Dissolution, redefinition, or dialectical maintenance of the I. Conclusion. The question, am I master of my acts, does not call for a simple yes or no answer, but for a transformation in our understanding of subjectivity. True freedom may begin where the illusion of the absolute master is relinquished.